What's up everybody? Hope you had a good weekend. It's been a while since I saw you because there was only one video last week, wasn't there? Last Monday, which means there's loads of questions to get through today, by the way. But it wasn't because I wasn't doing anything last week. I was actually really busy last week, and actually I filmed a couple of other videos which are now currently sort of in the edit, and you'll get to see shortly, but I hope they'll be quite good ones. So that's exciting. There are, as I say, plenty of questions to get through today, and I've got a couple of things to update you on. So welcome to another Ask Elvis. Right, let's get straight into it then with this question from MMM_BRA1NZ. On Twitter he says, Elvis, with machine learning and AI coming to the forefront of technology, do you think that any of the teams will use it for car design to create new aero designs and such? Well, they already are. Especially the big teams definitely have pretty advanced AI systems, and one of the major areas they use it in is exactly that, in design, in the drawing office. I kind of touched on it briefly, didn't I, last week, I think, in a question, but the way that AI is used largely within the drawing office of a Formula One team is that those programs are able to very quickly and efficiently kind of cut through the ideas that maybe don't have enough potential to be developed. You know, in a small team in Formula One, you would have to have an idea, you would have it drawn, you'd have it modelled, you know, you'd go through some kind of simulation process. Potentially, if you think it's good, you might even produce a part that could go onto a wind tunnel model or even be tested on a car. Now that's the process. That's how it used to work in the old days. That's how it still works with some of the smaller teams. In the bigger teams, what they're able to do is run that through an AI system which will be able to very quickly tell you if that idea has potential and is worth pursuing to the point of modelling and production. And that's where the bigger teams are able to do much more development on a much faster rate, because instead of having 20 engineers and designers looking at those kind of things, trying to figure out if it has potential to, you know, improve the car, well, the AI system is much better able, or much quicker able to do that sort of thing for them. So yes, it already exists, yes, it's already a big player, and it will only get bigger. Right, Maritz Bui, sorry if I got the name wrong, says, since we're talking about renewables and two-stroke engines recently, how about engines based on ethanol? Well, why not ethanol? I mean, actually, as we know, IndyCar has been using ethanol for years. It is a renewable fuel, it's based on alcohol. But what Formula One has looked at is the variations of renewable fuel, and ethanol falls into a category that Formula One calls Generation 2, the second generation of renewable, sustainable eco-fuels, if you like. What Formula One's looking at for 2025 and beyond, when potentially these two-stroke engines come in, is the third generation of ecological, sustainable fuels. And the reason they're looking at that is because they think that they're able to create a synthetic fuel that's better, that's more efficient, that produces more power, and is generally just more effective at doing its job than what we can currently get from ethanol or anything else. Thomas asks this one, he said, Elvis, do F1 teams have their own Wi-Fi network for all their communications, or does the FOM or circuit organisation supply them? How about data protection, hacking and spies at the track? Love your videos. Well, thank you, Thomas. It's a good question, and the answer to it is that, well, things are just about to change, or have just changed, potentially, certainly in a commercial sense, because up until now, Formula One has been partnered with the world's biggest network of undersea fibre optic cables, which for the last 8 years have connected up every one of the Formula One circuits around the globe with this insanely fast connection, which teams are able to send data to and from their factories all over the world with the minimal, the tiniest of delays. I mean, milliseconds worth of delays, which is crucial when we're talking about real-time communications and strategy and stuff that's been operated from the factory in real time making decisions during a Grand Prix, for example. So the tiniest of delays have been possible with that network. So that's how they're connected up to the rest of the world. Tata Communications have this network. They then come along and make a local connection from that point to the circuit in the days and weeks before the race is organised. So that's the way it operated. And then the teams have typically they all have their own communications partners within their teams that then come along and install a garage network off the back of that. And part of that will be their own little Wi-Fi network, secure Wi-Fi network within the garage itself. But it's all linked up through this Tata Communications system. The reason I say it's potentially just changed is that just a month ago, on the 31st of December 2019, Tata ended their 8-year deal with Formula One. They say that they need to find other opportunities to be able to tell the world about the things that they do. So sort of hinting that Formula One, although they were utilising their equipment, utilising their services, they weren't getting the exposure or the coverage or the recognition that they thought that they should be getting from that kind of deal. And that's an interesting subject that we could maybe talk about all day long. Perhaps if you want to drop your thoughts into the comments on that, let me know. Why would a company like Tata decide Formula One's no longer the right partner for them? Anyway, that's another subject. To answer your question, yes, they have a Wi-Fi network. It's linked up through that Tata situation. And by the way, what I imagine is going to happen here, because this kind of came out of the blue for Formula One a little bit, with very little notice or explanation as far as I can work out. I suspect what will have to happen is Formula One will still have to use that Tata network, but maybe now they'll just have to pay for it like any other customer or client would. Anyway, that's one to keep an eye on. But at the garage end, the teams, as I say, will create their own network off the back of that. Security for those networks is something that is actually kept very secure, bizarrely enough. It's one of those secret things that the Formula One teams will not share the details of for security reasons, obviously. Keeping their data secure and private is obviously a real performance-related, what's the word I'm looking for? It's something they have to take very seriously, because if they get a breach of that that network and some of their God, I can hardly speak today. If they get a breach of their network and some of their data, slips through the net, and certainly if it falls into the hands of some of their rivals or competitors, you can imagine, their competitive advantage is compromised. So that's why they have to take it very seriously, and they do so, which is why they have links with these big communication companies. So they're using the very latest technology to secure these systems, but they won't tell you what it is in case that information gets out and other teams find a way to breach it. Right, more of your questions to come, but I'm going to head home right now, and then I'm going to give you a little update on a couple of things that are coming up over the next weeks and months that I hope you might be interested in. Stay tuned. Right, okay, back home, and a couple of things to talk about quickly. First of all, I've been doing a competition on my Instagram stories. You might have seen it, where I sit in this seat on the simulator rig, driving a lap of a current Formula One circuit with the camera looking back at me, and you have to tell me which track it is just by looking at the steering inputs and listening to the exhaust or the engine sound. It's been a bit of fun. You guys have been amazing at it. Loads of people getting it right. Still running now, so go check it out. I'm going to be running through all the circuits over, I think there's about 15 left, so still loads of days for that to continue running. But did you see the video that's doing the rounds on my socials of me starting that process, sitting in this chair, about to do the first lap, and Pharrell kind of leaping all over me? Sounds mad, but it's one of the most watched videos I've ever done. It's done nearly, I think it's close to 200,000 people have seen it now on Twitter alone. Amazing video, and the best thing about it was that my timeline has just been full of people with smiles on their faces, loving it, because it's brought a little bit of joy. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's brilliant. It's worthwhile having a look at. Couple of other things. First of all, I've got a Tesla on loan this week. Thank you to Tesla for that. Tell me what you'd like to see me do with it. I've got a road trip to do over the space of a couple of days on Wednesday and Thursday. Quite a long road trip, so we're going to be properly testing it out, seeing what it's like to live with, seeing what it's like to be able to do long journeys and how you have to adapt your lifestyle to suit the car, or can the car adapt to suit your lifestyle? But if there's anything specific you want to know about Tesla Model 3 Performance, which is the version that I've got, just shout, let me know. Anything you'd like me to try with it or experiment with it or to show you, just let me know. Hit me up in the comments. I'll try and get through some of those later in the week. What else have I got to say? Oh yeah, there's a big update. Well, in fact, I'm going to do an update in another video because it's quite a big update on the Seedstream app. I know many of you are already using the Seedstream app because I talk to you all on a daily basis on there. If you haven't yet seen Seedstream or heard of it, that's fine. I will link it in the description of this video so you can go and check it out. But it's a kind of content aggregator Formula One app where all of the daily news and tweets and all of the important information about Formula One is dumped into one place. And I'm using it every day. I know lots of you are. But there's been some big updates around that and it's been transformed. It's my mate Ollie that's designed and created it. And I've been helping him out, trying to push him in the right directions. So there's an update on that coming. I will fill you in fully on that. But in the meantime, if you want to go and download it, as I say, I'll pop a link in the description. What else? Oh, lastly, I've also got the opportunity, potentially, to go to the Indy 500 this year. An amazing opportunity, not just go, but get proper grid access, unbelievable access, the sort of access that you can only dream of. Now, I'm just trying to work out whether or not it's financially viable and all those things, whether I can fit it in, whether I can actually do it. But if I do, what would you like to see from the Indy 500? What would you like to see from the world's biggest motor race? I mean, what an amazing experience. I can only imagine it must be. And obviously, if I go, I will bring you all of that. But is there anything specific you'd like me to get or to see or to try and achieve from the grid of the Indy 500? Again, let me know. Loads of those things are coming up. I've also done some videos, as I mentioned earlier, over the last few weeks. I've done a video with Jaguar Racing's Formula E team about how to make a racing driver's seat, which I think is going to be really quite interesting because it is a bit more technical, a bit more involved than you might originally think. And I've also done a couple of other things that are in the pipeline that I probably can't share yet, but will be coming soon. So loads of stuff happening behind the scenes, even though at the moment the videos have been relatively slow. I've also got some great ideas and I'm talking to some people about some brilliant things. But as ever, if you've got ideas, just shout. Just tell me what they are, because if they are good ones, you know, that's what this channel's for. It's to try and deliver the sort of content you want. So anything you want to know, anything you want to hear about or see or have explained or shown, just shout and I will do my very best. Anyway, that's the update part for now. So let's get on with some more questions because I've got some great ones for the second half of this video. We'll start with this one from Harsha, who says, "Hi Mark, Red Bull Racing have the best designer in F1, but their car isn't as good as Merc's in overall at all circuits. The power unit surely can't be the only reason. Money, driver isn't a problem also. So if Merc is winning much more, then surely their package is better." Well, this is exactly the thing with Formula One. No one element is enough to win you sustained success in Formula One. There's nothing that can, you know, you can have the best engine. If you say Mercedes have got the best engine, well, Williams have also got that engine. You know, if we're saying Ferrari have got the best engine, well, look, Haas have also got that engine too. So it's not about having the best engine. It's not about having one guy at the top of the design tree that might be able to transform. It's not about having one driver. The solution to winning consistently in Formula One is to having all of those things and to have them all work well together, because you can cherry pick certain elements. You then have to build a team that integrates them very well. You've got to, you know, this is what Merc have been extremely good at. And I touched on it before, didn't I, in the Jean Todt video about what Toto Wolff has been able to do. Build a culture within that organisation that allows that team and the individuals in that team to thrive and to capitalise on their strengths. It's about, Mercedes have been successful. Yes, they've developed an amazing power unit. Yes, they've developed a great chassis. You know, they've got great drivers, particularly in Lewis Hamilton, of course, but they've also got an amazing team. You know, they have got strategy right more often than others. They've made less mistakes than others. And when they have made mistakes, they've very openly learnt from those and made sure those same mistakes don't happen again. And that's what makes the best Formula One team. So there's no one element. You've got to have the whole lot and then knit it together in the most optimum way possible. Okay, this one comes from S4 FiTube, I think. Hey Mark, kudos on the channel content once again. I'm sure you've been watching the engine fire-ups. Just wondering, how is the week leading up to the fire-up? And is this the actual first ever fire-up? Do the customer teams learn anything from the analysis? And also, when do the likes of McLaren receive the Renault power unit engine? Will they check the claims from Renault to confirm that it is in fact the leading engine right now? Okay, so this week, the week just gone, where I'm sure you've seen some of the fire-ups on social media where they've been videoed by their teams. It's an incredibly hectic and busy week. It's one of the first big major milestones. And certainly as fans, it's often the first milestone that we get any notification of. Because there are many others before that. There's the delivery of the first chassis. There are passing things like the major crash tests. There are things like bodywork fits. They're all major milestones within the Formula One team, but the fire-up, it tends to get publicised now, so it's become a more public milestone. Incredibly busy time. Yes, it is typically the very first time that the engine is fired up. That's not for show. Obviously the power unit manufacturer will have run it on a rig, on a dyno, back at their base, but it's certainly the first time that it will have burst into life attached to a Formula One car. It probably won't be the same engine that you'll see when the cars get to the first test. You know, that engine will be in for fire up. In fact, most of the ones you saw firing up last week will already be out of the cars, back at the engine manufacturers, potentially having work done or whatever, or work being done to the actual engine that will go testing. And the teams may not get that actual running engine until, some of them won't get it until they actually get to Barcelona for the test. Others might get it in the days before they leave. Very much it will be a last minute thing to allow as much development time as absolutely possible. What else did you ask there? What do customer teams learn from the analysis? Nothing from the analysis of that first fire-up. So if you're a McLaren watching a Renault fire-up on social media, there's nothing to be learnt in that sense. What happens is Renault will send their own team of engineers down to McLaren when it's time for the McLaren fire-up, and they will run the engine side of the engine operations. All the systems that are required to fire that engine up will be operated by Renault engineers, in conjunction of course with the McLaren chassis engineers. It's very much a team operated thing. And you know, lots of people have said to me, well, what happens now that McLaren have announced that they are moving away from Renault at the end of this coming season? So will they start to get less information or less help from Renault? Look, we had this when we announced we were leaving Mercedes back in the day. We didn't get less information. We did have, it does change the relationship 100%, of course it does. And what happens is, but this is what always happens anyway, the manufacturer will absolutely keep the best engines. You know, having dynoed them all, there will be performance figures for each engine within tiny margins, but they will keep the best ones for themselves and give the customer teams the ones that are at the bottom end of that range. We're not talking a noticeable difference to the naked eye. We're talking about minute differences that are on some power graph or torque graph. But that's naturally what will happen. But in the end, Renault still want McLaren to do well because it reflects on their engine. So they're not going to give them something that's duff and something that's not going to work. So yes, to finish off your question there, will they check the claims from Renault to confirm that it's a leading engine? There is no way to check that. That's a claim that Renault might have made as a throwaway comment. It's not something that you're able to actually check, is it? I think that the Renault engine is decent, but is it good enough to be claiming to be the best? I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll see how it goes this year. And only really once we start getting through Australia in the first couple of races will we have a proper idea of whether that might be any truth in that at all or not. Right, here's a good one from Cold Forged Cowboy, who says, when Formula One teams spend money, they're effectively trying to buy speed and quicker lap times. Dollar for dollar, is it better to spend money on engineering or driver talent if a team has a fixed budget? That's a really interesting question. I guess it's a question that's forever been bandied around in Formula One. You know, what brings the most to a team? Is it your engine? Is it your chassis? Is it the team? Or is it the driver? Now, I've got my opinions on this, but I spoke to a guy, you may remember him, Tony Purnell. He was the former team principal at Jaguar and at Red Bull for a very short period of time. He then went to work for the FIA as an engineer, but then he also has now moved over to British Cycling to head up their technical development team. Incredibly clever guy, really lovely guy, and we had him on our show at Sky a while ago, and I interviewed him, and one of the questions that came up was, you know, what's the biggest difference between having worked at the top of Formula One's technical department and then having worked at the top of British Cycling's technical department? What are the obvious differences? And he said to me, in Formula One, the driver brings 10% of the performance, the car brings 90%. In cycling, he said it's almost exactly the other way around. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it. And if you take that as being a given, well then, to answer your question, Cold Forge Cowboy, you spend your money on the car. You spend your money on engineering over that of a driver. The driver will bring you that last little percentage. It will bring you the difference, which can be the difference between winning or losing, but he needs a decent car. The Lewis Hamiltons of this world will not take a Williams and deliver some podiums and race wins with it. It's simply not possible. The car hasn't got that speed in it. So if you're going to focus a limited budget, focus it on engineering. Okay, Holm86 says, will 2021 see the return of in-season testing? I mean, if there's a budget cap, teams should be allowed to spend their money as they wish, right? Two really good points there. The first, let's say about 2021 and in-season testing, I don't think there's any way that's going to come back. I don't think we're going to suddenly open the doors up and say, go testing as much as you want. I'm going to address the second part of that question in a moment, but the reason that they won't do that, I think, is less about budget, because you're right, we've now got a budget cap coming in that can control that. It's much more about how the teams prepare for a race weekend. You know, there's this growing theory that if you arrive at a race weekend, at a Grand Prix weekend, less prepared, you know, and we've seen this off the back of Fridays that have been washed out or cancelled due to weather or whatever. We get to Saturday where it really matters and teams have had less preparation, then the racing potentially could be better because, you know, it's less simulated, it's been less predicted. It's a little bit more about learning as you go, flying from the seat of your pants kind of thing. So I suspect there'll still be that theory running through Formula One, and they will try to minimise the amount of preparation that teams can do before they get to a Grand Prix. You know, that has a big effect potentially on the racing itself, but it also has an effect where the smaller teams that potentially can't do as much testing or simulation or preparation starts to close that gap up a little bit as well. So that's why I don't think they will do it. But then to get onto the second part, you know, we've got a budget cap, so why not just open up things like that to the teams? Well, that's something that I think we need to start thinking differently about, and actually something that I think would be quite interesting. You know, there's so many rules in Formula One which are there historically to cap costs, to stop people spending a fortune, to stop costs running away with things and the sport becoming, you know, too unsustainable. There are a lot of rules like that about things like materials and about certain, you know, the amount of wind tunnel time and the amount of simulation and CFD computer time you can use, or computing power you can use. Those are all things there to stop people just spending endless amounts of money. Well, if the regulations now prevent people spending endless amounts of money, should we not just let them spend it on whatever they want and let them decide where they want to focus their limited budget? I think that would be quite an interesting thing to look at. It obviously needs quite a lot of looking at, because what probably would happen in the end is that everybody would end up focusing their budget on one particular thing. That might be CFD, it might be some kind of artificial intelligence or deep learning capabilities. Whatever they think will give them the biggest bang for their buck, if you like, is probably where that budget would all end up converging. But actually for a few years, while that's being experimented on, and while some teams have certain systems and certain technologies that they can focus on, whether others might have strengths in other areas, perhaps we'd get some sort of variation in that. I'd love to know what you think on that. Should we just relax the rules on spending in terms of the technical wording, if you like, with potentially even things like testing, and just let the budget cap do its job to keep costs from spiralling out of control? Interesting thought. Right, let's finish up with this one from The Verve to Paint on Instagram. He says, "Hi Mark, I've seen a few YouTube videos already talking about the driver market for 2021 season, the driver moves and predictions, etc. I have only seen one mention of a female driver, Jamie Chadwick, but despite her mention in that video, she still wasn't predicted to find a seat. In your opinion, when do you see this finally happening, and or what is it going to take to see a woman driver in F1? Right, the ongoing question, isn't it? So much talk of this right now. W Series was an amazing step in the right direction to bring attention to the female racing driver community. Now, it was split opinion down the middle. Some people thinking it shouldn't be segregated, others thinking it's an amazing opportunity for these girls to give them, not only gives them a platform, but it's a paid championship. It's a championship where they don't have to worry about funding. And that, for me, is an amazing opportunity. Whether you're a girl or a boy trying to get into racing at the highest level, funding is often the biggest barrier. You know, how many times have we seen great talent of any gender falling by the wayside because they haven't had the budget to get to the very top? And equally, how many times we've seen drivers with an enormous budget, but potentially a bit low on the talent side, equally making it into Formula One. It's not how racing should be, certainly not how the pinnacle of racing should be. So my own opinion is that W Series was an amazing step in the right direction for all of those involved. I'm pleased to see that it's going from strength to strength. It's going to appear at 2 races on the F1 calendar this year, which is brilliant because it gets the number of eyeballs and the awareness of that championship at an even higher level. And the other thing that happens just naturally when you put a support race on a Grand Prix weekend, and I can say this from experience, is the people within those Formula One garages end up watching it. And I don't think that's necessarily the case on a race that might happen on any other weekend. Because if you're working in racing on most weekends and you get a weekend off, quite often the last thing you want to do is go and watch another motor race. So to have it on your garage monitors all around every garage in the pit lane on a Grand Prix weekend will be, it might sound like a small thing, but it will put it in front of some very, very important, key, influential people within the Formula One world. To get back to the specifics of your question, when's it going to happen? I mean, that is an impossible one to answer. Jamie Chadwick won the championship last year in brilliant fashion. She's a lovely girl. I've worked with her a couple of times. She's gone back to do it again this year. Now, there are two ways to look at that. She's gone back in this year because this year, 2020, the W Series has just been announced that it will qualify for super license points. Now, you know, you need 40 super license points to race in Formula One. You need 25 super license points to take part in the Friday practice sessions on a Grand Prix weekend. So super license points are everything if you're trying to reach the top in Formula One. She has another opportunity this time around. It's a real shame she didn't get any last time out for winning that title. But this time around she's going back in to try and do it again. There's no reason to say she couldn't do it again. The other thing with Jamie is that she already has a connection with Formula One in that she's a development driver for Williams. Now that's probably one of the best places to be if you're trying to break in, particularly as a female. It's the only team in Formula One with a female leader at the very top. Vice team principal, Claire Williams, of course. You know, now Jamie shouldn't be getting into Formula One because of her gender. She should be getting in like any other racing driver because of her talent. That's what the whole world wants to see. But we cannot also deny that there are marketing sides to this whole thing. It happens all the way through the sport. It's happening right now in our sport. People get drives in Formula One with a combination of their driving talent and their marketability and the funding, the backing that comes with them. Now, you cannot say that somebody like Jamie, who absolutely is talented, I'd love to see her get into Formula One. You couldn't say that she could have got there just purely based on the fact that she's a woman. People will say that, but it cannot be the case because she's won championships. She's a great driver, and the time she's spending right now in that development role at Williams will A, give her great experience of how a Formula One team operates and how she can integrate herself into it, but from Williams' perspective, it will also be a really good opportunity for them to analyse her and for them to make that decision to find out, is she ready? Is she capable? Has she got what it takes to step up to the final hurdle on the ladder? I'd love to see her get there, you know, and others. And the biggest problem with answering your question is that Jamie's the most natural, the most obvious choice because she's probably at the top of that tree of female racing talent right now that's close to Formula One. The bigger problem, the much bigger problem, is that we're picking Formula One drivers from a very small pool of talented racing drivers that have some funding or backing typically behind them. Now, if you expand that pool out and go back to grassroots at karting, I wonder how many girls are getting involved in karting right from a really young age. Because if you take 100 kids who take up karting, you know, maybe you can count them on one hand, probably, of those who actually make it to Formula One. Well, how many of those 100 kids at grassroots level at the moment are girls? Probably not very many. So that is one of the things that we need to address, we need to change, we need to encourage girls and give them the opportunity, if they want to try racing, to not feel like it's a male-dominated sport. And I think that's one of the big things that W Series is really having a massive impact on. Not only giving the girls involved an opportunity, but showing to other girls, youngsters around the world, that girls can be racing drivers. It's not a male-only sport. So I'd love to see it. I don't know when it's going to happen, but look, fingers crossed, it'll be a great moment when it does, and there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for all your questions this week. I hope that was another good one. I think it was. There's really good questions in there this time around. I'll be back later this week, as I say, with an update on that Seedstream app, amongst other things, and of course, don't forget to drop me your notes on what you want to see from the Tesla. It's an amazing car. I've been lucky enough to drive a few of them. They can do some incredible things. So let me know. I've got pretty much a blank canvas to do with that, what I want, so give me a shout. Keep the questions coming. I'll answer as many as I can in the comments section. But for now, I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.